Have you ever seen a speech and felt like the speaker was just talking at you instead of interacting with you? Great professional speakers are masters at audience interaction, and you can be too with a little practice. And by the way, a caveat here, if you can't do these things with your family and friends, colleagues, you're never going to be able to do them in front of an audience. So you need to practice with people you know and get some caring and supportive feedback from them about whether or not they like it. Because in this session, we're going to look at audience interaction, ways that you can connect with and interact with your audience so that you can have that connection and you will be more effective at communicating and better remembered, probably more well liked too. As usual, give me your email address just so I can send this information back to you that you submit. And we're looking at impacting your audience, breaking the rules. It was the last time. This time we're looking at audience interactions. Again, people will see your name, so use an alias if you don't want people to see your name. So we're looking at audience interactions. How can you use audience interactions? Well, audience interaction is very important to public speaking because human beings are interactive. We interact. That's what we do. So just because you're speaking or giving a speech doesn't mean you are up here and they are down there. You still want to interact with them, and that's what this session is about. So here are some exercises that you want to practice just on an interacting with others way over the next 2 days. Again, practice these for 2 days and then come back and report how it felt and what you think you can do to make it better in the future. So first, follow the 2-minute rule. When I was working to be trained as a Dale Carnegie public speaking instructor, one of the rules that we had was that you had 2 minutes to interact with your audience. In other words, as an instructor, I couldn't talk for any more than 2 minutes before I got some kind of response or interaction from my audience. And you might think, no, that makes sense. Or you might think, well, I don't think I ever had a teacher who ever interacted with us. And that's why this is not teaching, this is public speaking. And you should see, and when I teach in a university or do lectures or seminars, I'm interacting quite a bit. And it's a little more difficult to do here, isn't it? But in fact, my students at first think it's kind of weird, but then after a while they realize that they're learning more, they're engaged better, and it's more interesting. Oh, again, the 2-minute rule. Number 2, ask questions and get responses. Don't just ask the question. At times you may just ask a question and not get a response, but push them for responses. I play this. I ask a question and I tell the audience, this is yes, this is no, okay, and I make sure they can do it. And you do things like raise your hand if you do this or you do that. And it helps to do this right away, because the sooner you do it, the easier it will be to continue. But if you take your time and don't start right away, it doesn't get any easier. Okay, that's just a pro tip. Also, you can give demonstrations, but the main thing is practice, practice, practice. You can use gimmicks like fall down, or have the audience stand up and talk, or have the audience high-five each other, and these are good. Or you can do something like break a glass, but be careful. You want to make sure that you've practiced them ahead of time, because the more you practice, the better you will know yourself and how to do it with your audience, and timing and pace, things like that. Again, you want to try these with your friends and neighbors. Also, lead groups into discussions. Have people talk to each other. I do this a lot with pairs. Talk to the person next to you, or small groups. Get 3 or 4 people around you to talk about this idea. And you can do the progressive pair, where you just have a pair talk to each other. then you have two pairs talk to each other, and so on. This gets a little tricky when they're in a stadium venue. It's easier when they are in a flat venue where the one row can turn around and talk to the row behind them. It's a little bit easier that way. Number 6, use apps and technology. The one thing, I use a lot of apps and technology when I'm speaking, when I'm teaching, but it's really tricky. So you got to make sure they work and they're easy for the audience to use. No matter how many times you've used it, it's not going to be so easy for your audience. Then the last one is control distractions and interruptions. I've said this before. I've never given a speech, never taught a class where there hasn't been some sort of disruption. A noise from the environment outside, something happened in the venue. For example, I was leading a leadership workshop in Los Angeles, and suddenly smoke started coming out of the vents. What do you do? Right? So be ready for these things. Know what to do, and be prepared, because it's going to happen. And also there's things like audience members get grumpy, and we talked a little bit about that with answering questions. That's a good way to deal with that. Now your assignment is to, for the next 2 days, try these out. Use each one of these and try out, how am I going to control distractions or use technology with my friends, neighbors, and see what works for you. See how well it works, how comfortable you felt with it, and then how can you improve on it. And that's for 2 days. And by the way, I get the 2-day challenge from Tim Ferriss in his 4-hour work week book. He has a lot of comfort challenges, so that's where that came from. So in conclusion, we've talked about audience interactions. We talked about the 2-minute rule, just doing it for a few minutes, and then asking questions, using demonstrations, having gimmicks, leading groups in discussion, using technology and applications and apps, and controlling distractions to the interactions. And this is quite important for you in your presentations, because it can make that difference between a great talk to an interactive, memorable connection with your audience. So, interact with your audience. Make that connection.